Thank you very much, Shiri. Thank you for hosting me and for hosting everybody else. And thank you for working tremendously. On this organizing and putting together this event, this webinar. I know it takes a lot of time and energy, and thank you very much for that. It's also my pleasure to share this platform with distinguished speakers from many places. And let me mention somebody I know, and that's Greg Mills, who has been following Somaliland for a very, very, very long time, both as a scholar and as an election observer. And actually, he has led several election observers to Somaliland, and he is a man who knows a lot about Somaliland. And I welcome him. I'm glad to share this platform with him. Let me also welcome all the audience that are joining us today from all over the world, particularly from Somaliland, from Israel, from the USA, from South Africa, and from the rest of the region. So let me start from the latest, as you said, controversy. You created a lot of controversy, okay? So let me start with that controversy and start from the latest development and then walk backwards to the history and the background of Somaliland. When Israel recognized Somaliland on 26 December 2025, it created what some people actually describe it as geopolitical earthquake. Speculation is pouring in from different parts of the world. Reactions were different. Some of them, they put out their conspiracy theories about the objectives of Israel. What Israel wants in the Horn of Africa? What do they want in Somaliland? To the point that some, analysts in the Middle East branded it as a second Sykes-Picot agreement in the Middle East, up to that level. Condemnations were swift from regional organizations like the African Union, the Arab League, the EU, everywhere. But there was another earthquake that was, barely registered, or many people did not notice, and that was the earthquake that came from Somaliland itself. The reaction of the Somaliland people and the jubilation and the celebrations and the emotional outpouring of the Somaliland people on hearing the recognition of their country by the state of Israel. And that shows something that should have been actually registered. Somaliland, which is a predominantly Muslim country, whose perception, the people's perception, has been framed by the Israeli-Arab conflict for decades and decades, like any other Muslim countries. And all of a sudden, this tectonic change of mind and heart happened, and that Muslim country embraced the Israeli flag and came out to the streets wearing, Somaliland women wearing the Israeli flag as hijab. And people should have asked it, you know what? Maybe Israel has touched a nerve here. This was something that the international community did not notice. And actually, it was like that. That tectonic earthquake that happened in Somaliland was a reflection of the injustice, international injustice and hypocrisy that Somaliland faced for over the last 35 years. And why I say that? Let's look at history. On the same year, 1991, when Somaliland restored, Somaliland is not a secessionist, as the media cliche always say. It's not a breakaway. It's not a secessionist. It's not a separatist. It was an entity that existed before independence and after independence, and then joined a failed union, and then restored and reclaimed its sovereignty one more time. So in 1991, when Somaliland restored or reinstated its independence again and sovereignty, there was the collapse of the Soviet Union. And out of the ashes of the Soviet Union, 14 Republican countries emerged, or 14 Republican states emerged. Some of them, the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, but some of the republics, like almost 7 republics, declared unilateral restoration of their independence in 1990, 1 year before the collapse of the Soviet Union. Later, In Yugoslavia is split into 7 countries. Czechoslovakia is split into two states. Down the road, and in Africa, for example, Eritrea became independent the same year, 1991, when Somaliland restored its independence. A decade later, South Sudan became independent. And in Asia, Timor-Leste or Eastern Timor became independent. All these countries, this is where I'm coming to the hypocrisy and injustice of the world. All these countries, the international community did not invoke what they call rules-based order or international law. They did not invoke violation of integrity and territorial integrity and sovereignty of other countries, like the Soviet Union, for example, or like Yugoslavia, or like Czechoslovakia, or like Ethiopia, for example, or Sudan. Nobody invoked that, okay? But then when it comes to Somaliland, it is international law comes into place. The violation of sovereignty and territorial integrity comes to place. And just like the Soviet Union republics, Somaliland was an independent entity, was a separate entity that was colonized separately by the British until it got its independence on 26 June 1960. The other side of Somalia, we call now Federal Republic of Somalia, was an Italian colony. 2 different entities, 2 different colonial systems, and then 2 independence days. Somaliland became independent on 26 June 1960, 5 days before the other side, and then the Italian Somalia became independent on 1st July 1960. The day when we became independent, 34 countries recognized Somaliland. We have still, and you can find it, the congratulatory cables that came from many states of the world, the United States, including China, and the proclamation of independence by the Queen of England that time. That's what Somaliland was. And then 5 days later, we joined a failed union. And that union was problematic from the beginning and was not actually based on reality, because the dream of the Somali-speaking people in the Horn of Africa, which was in 5 parts of the Horn of Africa, like Djibouti, which was called that time the French Somali coast, and then the Somali region in Ethiopia, which is mistakenly called most of the time as Ogaden, and the Somali region in Kenya, which was called the Northern Frontier District, and the Italian Somalia and Somaliland Protectorate. All the dream of the Somali people was that to bring all these people in under one flag and one state called Greater Somalia. That was the dream. That dream was unrealistic. Somali people were not aware, were not educated enough that time that Africa itself was all like that. Like if you look at the Swahili speaking people in Africa, there are 150 million. There are over 17 countries in Africa. The Hausa speaking people are like that. The Fulani speaking people are like that. The Berber people in North Africa are like that. So it was unrealistic to think about uniting people by the basis of language. And then when the union happened, it was immediately problematic. 2 different systems, 2 different cultures. It was never ratified legally. And you know, it just dragged it on for a few years until the military took power, and then it was a military dictatorship of a Soviet satellite regime that was very oppressive, and particularly for the Somaliland people. And at the end of the day, Somaliland people have to take arms against the regime, and there was a devastating civil war that resulted genocide, one of the biggest genocides that time in the Horn of Africa, actually, and maybe in East Africa, or maybe the whole African continent. At that time, unfortunately, we didn't have internet. If we had internet, the situation would have been different today. And then in 1991, the central government collapsed. The Somaliland people came together and they said, no more union. And they restored their independence. 1991. Same time as the Soviet republics, same time as for example Eritrea and many other places. But then the international community always, when it comes to Somaliland, invokes international law, invokes violence against sovereignty and territorial integrity of a fictional state that only exists by international law by name, that only exists in international law by name only. And the reality is there. So when Israel recognizes Somaliland, it recognizes a reality on the ground. It recognizes an existing state that has actually fulfilled all the conditions of statehood according to the Montevideo Convention, and a country also that does not violate the Charter of the African Union. And here I will read what the Charter of the African Union says, that was passed in 1964 by the Organization of African Unity. It says the AU declared that all member states pledge themselves to respect the borders existing in their achievement of national independence. Look at that, on their achievement of national independence. In other words, to the principle of inviolability of colonially inherited territorial integrity. That is what the charter says. Somaliland abides by that charter fully. It's the independence border, it's the colonial border, it's a border that has international agreements with it, Anglo-Italian agreement, and Anglo-Ethiopian, Anglo-Italian, many other agreements have been signed, and they are all available. So Somaliland, 35 years, has established a fully functioning government, a role for actually democracy in Africa. And I think and a scholar like Greg Mills will testify to that. And he testified many times in his reports, in the report issued by his by election observers. Multiple one-person, one-vote elections, 6 peaceful transfer of power in a very, very tough neighborhood. We prevented terrorism and piracy from our strategic position where we are located in the Gulf of Aden, where 30% of international trade passes through, and have been facing problems recently. And that's the world, when the world woke up to the actually strategic importance of Somaliland and its coast. And then 35 years of peace and stability, and that role model the international community have just given us a blind eye and look at the other side. Instead of recognizing us, they just condemned us, isolated us. And let me give you one of the injustices that happened to us. When COVID happened, during the COVID time, Somaliland could not get COVID vaccine from all over the world, from the United Nations, from independent nations. We applied and appealed to everywhere, and no country actually gave us vaccine. And the simple reason was, you are not a recognized country, you are not a member of the United Nations, so we don't know how to give you vaccine. It was our people, and particularly the Somalilander American doctors here in the United States, who actually took the first oxygen concentrators and oxygen cylinders to Somalia. Later on, some vaccines came from friendly countries like Taiwan and the United Arab Emirates, and some came from the United States, and a little from WHO. So that is the kind of injustice that Somaliland people facing. Now, when we got the Harry Truman movement, what the Israel actually is a Harry Truman movement, when Harry Truman recognized the state of Israel, the movement that it was declared on 14 May 1948, now we have our Harry Truman movement. And Somaliland, this is an achievement that we have been struggling for 35 years. We say thank you to Israel.
Kamaran Chegi Bangiga, oo la jaar dahabanaas. Kaydso lacagtaada mar kasta iyo meel kasta. Ku dhex isticmaal adeegyada Somtel iyo iDahab. ku xidha akoonkaaga bangiga oo ka dhex maamulo lacagtaada. u soo wareegoo la jaanqaad dunida casriga oo ku maamulo abka dahabalaas nolol maalmeedkaaga maaliyadeed. hadda kala soo deg App Store iyo Play Store abka dahabalaas.